civilized society. As much as we all dislike paying taxes, they enable the town to fund infrastructure improvements for the use by the industry, businesses, and residents, and therefore create a community of choice. If the town is one with a high mill rate, the town's overall goal is to capture taxable value to help bring the mill rate back down to the average communities and to make new investments more palatable for developers. For East Millinocket to get to a 22 or a 23 mill rate, the town would need at least 30 million in new investment. So to allow for a 30-year TIF is almost unheard of today, but one with a shorter time span and with monies allocating back to the town as well as monies being directed to the site improvements make for a more beneficial TIF for the taxpayer and the town. There's other investments and incentives such as ETIF, which is part of the overall package of what you put together for any development. It's an employment tax increment financing program, and it helps new and established Maine businesses to hire new employees by refunding from 30 to 80% of the state withholding taxes for up to a 10-year period. The reimbursement rate rises with the level of local employment, with companies who are Pine Tree Development Zone certified receiving the highest reimbursement at 80%. This reimbursement incentive can be used to package a benefit plan for enticing new investment. The city of Old Town used this as part of a multi-tiered benefit and incentive package to keep Johnson Outdoors Old Town Canoe in the city and to bring Ferndale, Washington Necky kayaks production into the Old Town facility. In the end, we did prevail because the package was overwhelming, but this was one of those pieces. If your business plans to hire 5 or more new full-time employees over a 2-year period, you may be eligible for ETIFs, and it should be considered with any marketing proposal. If a business is also seeking Pine Tree Development Zone certification, they will be enrolled automatically in the ETIF program as part of the Pine Tree zones. Business equipment tax exemption, or what they call Betty. I'm not going to talk too long on this because my understanding of it, it kind of goes out the door a little bit. But the Betty program is 100% property tax exemption program for eligible property that would have been first subject to tax in Maine on or after April 1st, 2008. Any development should look at this program and determine how it benefits them. So for example, in 2014, East Millinocket Hydro Dam, the Betty reimbursement was about 1.4 million. If the hydro dam provided power to the former mill property, they would again qualify for Betty. And these things need to be calculated out so that you can help encourage those kind of developments and build outs. The Pine Tree Zone program, again, is also another program that offers eligible businesses the opportunity to reduce or virtually eliminate state taxes for up to 10 years, depending on meeting certain criteria within the state statutes. Certain exemptions, reimbursements, and credits may apply. Some of these are corporate income tax credits, income tax reimbursement, sales and use tax exemption and reimbursement, access to reduced electric rates, and insurance premium tax credits. And all of these can be found either at DECD or the Maine Revenue Services. Opportunity zones, I'm still trying to figure out what it is. I'm sorry, the sun is coming up here. And it's a program that's available for development in certain qualified zones, and those should be considered. Now, the one that I find within the community's control is a local revolving loan. Sometimes those are created by old CDBG grants that have to be turned into revolving loans. But if a community has the financial stability, creation of an RLF could be the pole that brings home a development into your community. When I was in Old Town, we calculated the value of an existing TIF on Old Town Canoe's property. This TIF had about 10 years remaining on it, and it calculated out to be about $692,000. The city had been reserving funds for economic development and had more than this amount set aside. These funds were generated from the legal agreements between Casella, Juniper Ridge Landfill, the state, and the city through tipping fees. The city gave to Old Town Canoe this amount in an interest-free loan that was repaid over the remaining 10 years of the TIF. I believe it was this cash-rich offer that enticed Johnson Outdoors to move its West Coast operation to Old Town, Maine. Otherwise, Old Town Canoe would not be in Old Town, Maine. Having a local loan program helps put the town in the driver's seat for new business industrial development and should be considered if you have the ability to do that. And then again, the last piece is local allocation for development, which is the power of taxation. Again, if a town is in a financial position, the ability to appropriate tax dollars to accommodate a new development can be helpful. It might be in the way of financing infrastructure improvements, roads or parking, sewer, water, and building improvements that could benefit the development, as well as other build-outs of the area. So it's a tricky ground, but what towns need to do is ask the tough questions. And one of the toughest ones that I found over the years, especially if it's a new development that might not have hit the market, what's the commercialization process? Have they marketed it? What's their market position? You need to ask some of the tough questions that they would probably sit back, and if their answer is no, then you need to reconsider what your extent of municipal involvement will be. So that's pretty much the extent of what I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peggy. And Peggy has also supplied me with some written supplies, which I will send out to the attendees and other folks for today that codify what she has shared with us. And point of order for the folks joining us, you can write, I believe if you have any questions down in the Q&A, and we can ask those as we go if you have any pertinent questions to what the speakers are saying. Next, I'm going to invite up Tina Mullins to speak. And Tina, if you could just enhance on what your role is at DECD as well for the benefit of the audience.
Sure. So yeah, I do work with the state of Maine, the Department of Community Economic and Community Development, which we often shorten as DECD. And basically, the applications arrive at DECD and they're just reviewed for statutory requirements. And we just work with any questions or concerns we may have with the municipality or the consultants to get the TIF approved. And then that's sort of where we are and what we do there. I'll just probably reiterate some of what Peggy said, but ultimately, one tool a municipality has to foster industrial and commercial development is to consider the municipal tax increment financing. Often we refer, everything's acronyms, we refer to that as TIFs or MTIFs for brief. They're essentially designed to assist municipalities to encourage industrial, commercial, trans-oriented or arts district development, to increase or retain employment, and to broaden the tax basis. I could probably talk all day about TIFs, to be honest with you, but I'll rein myself in. But ultimately, a municipality, they identify a parcel of land where it's known that business or developer will develop land or improve property, and we refer to that as a TIF district. The land and the development, the land development or expansion causes the value of the property to increase, or we would hope, and that's the purpose. And the increase of the property value translates to an increase of property taxes. The portion of property taxes that increases due to this development of the district is what is referred to as the tax increment, and it's used for allowable projects that are outlined under TIF statute, including what Peggy had mentioned is the possibility of a municipality considering tax credit enhancement agreements. The credit enhancement agreements, they return a portion or all of the property taxes paid on the increased value of the development to the business or the developer to assist with capital costs of the development or to entice the business or developer to locate in their municipality. Some examples of allowable project costs in general are capital cost of acquisition or construction of the land, building structures, public ways, utilities, professional services costs, which Peggy had mentioned. DECD, as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, is tasked with ensuring that the TIF application complies with the statutory requirements. And to assist with this, we created a fillable application available on our website, either to use or to use as a guide. And then that's all sort of I have to say for that. You know, it is really a valuable tool, and our really goal is to have MTIFs as much as they possibly can, like, you know, for the municipalities to have that control of what they look like, how many years, what their credit enhancement looks like, what project costs they may pick from the allowable project costs.
Tina, how much are you involved with what you approve what the town is going to use that those shielded funds for, right?
Well, the municipality, they look at the list of allowable project costs, and from that list in statute, a municipality would sort of choose what they see would be most beneficial for them. And then they outline those in the development the program. And per statute, the project cost must state, you know, how much of the TIF revenues or how much the project will cost. And it's truly, this is something the municipality, you know, would have researched and have a better concept and idea of how much that would cost or how much of the TIF funds they would like to allocate to that. So that's listed out in the development program. And what we look at is the project outlined in the development plan, does that meet statute? And that's what we, you know, and if there's, say, any questions, we don't understand the language, you know, because often when we work on something, you know, we know what we're talking about, but to provide it to somebody else, it's just Greek sometimes. So we iron that out just so we can understand it, and then we proceed from there. But the goal is always to when I review it, at least, you know, the goal is always, you know, for me to understand what's the intent, and that's it. So.
Terrific. Tina, thank you
At least
so much.
That's my goal. Hopefully, John, you can minimally, you know, let me know if I'm succeeding there.
Terrific. Well, to tee off what Tina was talking about, we have John Pottle from Eaton Peabody. John is going to talk about how TIFs are applied in the field, if you will. John, I'll just let you jump in, and if you want to give an enhanced description of your role, that'd be wonderful as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Robert, and good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So, as I mentioned, I'm an attorney, so don't hold that against me. TIF projects, I actually really enjoy. I always kind of refer to them as kind of above the line projects. They're usually, you know, they're always positive. Oftentimes attorneys get into very adversarial disputes. So very enjoyable projects from my perspective. I have the privilege to kind of see both ends in a sense, where whether it's helping a municipality go through a new TIF or an amendment to a TIF, going through kind of that community process, but also on the private sector side, where, whether it's a commercial or industrial type facility, you know, I've seen that perspective as well. And I think that's helpful because really, as Peggy was alluding to, I think it really is a process that involves both the public and the private sector. You really have to have a certain level of dialogue in order to have really, in my view, you know, to really accomplish what the TIF statute is really seeking to do. So I'll offer some thoughts or remarks, probably a little bit from both perspectives. And hopefully that'll provide a little bit of insight on how, you know, TIFs, districts, associated development programs, credit enhancement agreements, you know, might be, you know, a potential tool in the toolbox for folks, you know, whether you're for the government, the municipality, or on the private sector end, or maybe somewhere in between. From the municipal side, the way I would would boil it down from a high level perspective is tax increment financing is one of those economic development tools for a municipality. And primarily, I would say, is to incentivize the private sector businesses, whether they're existing in the community or potentially looking to locate in the community, or maybe the community is trying to attract them there. There's incentives that the tax increment financing program can help provide. Clearly, there are many other incentives out there, but it's one of the tools in the toolbox, as they say. The other side of it, I would view it from a municipal side, is a potential funding source. As Tina had mentioned, tax increment financing, it's not existing tax base. We're talking about new taxes on improvements, investment that's coming in. So you're broadening the tax base in a sense. And I think that's a really important point because, as Tina mentioned too, a lot of time at the local level, just explaining what tax increment financing is, and sometimes more often what it isn't, is very important from a community perspective, as well as on the private side, quite frankly. So, from the funding source side, that's where, the towns, if the town does have a TIF district and they think of what are projects that are eligible projects under the TIF statutory framework, what are projects we might want to do? And of course, doing projects, and it only happens if you have resources. And that's where the revenues come in. If the town is retaining tax revenues designated as TIF revenues, they can use those from new investment improvement to do economic development activities. And those are far ranging from infrastructure projects, which again might have some relationship to a specific project that's coming in, or a new investment in an existing facility, to helping support economic development director or partial salary compensation to support that function in a town. You need boots on the ground, if you will. So the question I often get is, well, what's the process? Well, the process to adopt a TIF, very high level, is pretty streamlined. You have to have, the application prepared. You have your publication in the newspaper at least 10 days in advance. You have the public hearing, legislative body votes, application goes into DECD. Hopefully it's a quality application. Tina reviews it and approves it. Now that sounds very streamlined, but it isn't, because in reality, on the municipal side, there's always, what I suggest, and most people do, is have informal education sessions with inviting members of the public. I know that's a little bit different during our COVID-19 era, but having those sessions is well worth the effort, in my view, because it'll help answer questions that people will have and help them learn a little bit more about what tax increment financing is and is not. It's the classic, if people aren't familiar with something, they're immediately going to be cautious. I mean, that's exactly how I would feel. The more people learn about it, I think they learn about the pros and cons, whether that's a good fit for our community or not. It's really a helpful exercise to do. Now, most of the time, that exercise doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's happening because someone from the private sector is probably showing up. And if they're familiar with tax increment financing and the possibility of having a credit enhancement agreement, or as Peggy alluded to too, there may be a need for public infrastructure improvements to help facilitate that project, particularly if it's a very large industrial project. They're going to come to the community and see, is there a way that, we can work with the community to help our investment happen. And Peggy is exactly right from the municipal side. You want to ask a lot of questions. You want to understand, who are these folks, and, is this plan for real? On the private side, in a sense, they're also looking at the community, wondering, are we going to be welcomed in this community? Is this a place where our capital, our money, is going to be viewed as valuable and welcome to come in? Because they're looking at it from a almost from some similar questions, but from a different angle. And what they're doing from a financial side, if you're looking at an investment, you're looking at your pro forma, one of the cost item is going to be taxes, and you're looking at all the other expenses you're going to have to be doing for a project. Now, granted, taxes will not be the largest expense item in that pro forma, and that all is going to depend on what the project is. But a credit enhancement agreement, it's a contract where essentially, as Peggy said, a portion of that taxpayer's taxes get returned according to whatever the deal is. And the deal can range from a fixed percentage for a fixed amount of years. It could have triggering events, such as if you invest at least $1 million, will increase the reimbursement back to you to help incentivize that, to job growth. So there's a variety of ways that you can structure those credit enhancement agreements to kind of incentivize the developer, if you will, the taxpayer, to do maybe more than they already would, or in that sense. It's important, I think, because a lot of times people ask the question, well, does a business really need a credit enhancement agreement to really make the project go? Is it a go or no go? And that varies. It's going to vary project to project. I will tell you some projects, it's a difference maker. In other senses, it may not be, but it may make a difference in whether they decide to locate in your community or in the state of Maine. What we're all realize is, we're at a competitive field, particularly if they're industrial facilities. They tend to be, if they're existing, they're competing with folks outside of the state of Maine globally, in a sense. And, their cost competitiveness makes a big difference in their survival and their ability to grow. And similarly, for folks that may be looking to come into the community, they're making capital budget decisions based on a number of factors, likely looking at different other locations as well. An often question is there local support? And sometimes that local support takes the form of a credit enhancement agreement. So, even though it may not be, even though it's small dollars in a sense to a very large project coming in, that can be a difference maker in their metrics when they're looking at whether or not to invest in the state of Maine or in a particular community. As we all know, there are great advantages the state of Maine has. There are also some disadvantages when we look at other areas or regions of the country, particularly from just to use forest products as a theme. It's a very competitive industry that's out there. So the private sector is looking at those things. They want people, if they're going to make significant investment, they want to have a positive, welcome relationship locally. And, a lot of times that takes the form of one of those credit enhancement agreements and many other forms. But the one reason I say that too is because, as Peggy was saying, when you do a tax increment funding district, and particularly if it's associated with a particular business or attracting a particular business, there's dialogue that happens. And the more dialogue that has, and hopefully both sides gain that trust and understanding, that's going to improve the chances of a quality investment in the community. That helps the community. Obviously, it's going to be helpful to the private business as well, but it's got to be the right fit. And you don't know until you have that level of communication. So even though the approval process from a high level, you can hit those marks pretty straightforward, there's a lot that happens beforehand in terms of, is this a good fit for the community? Is there going to be a financial package which may include a credit enhancement agreement that helps an existing business expand or a new business come in? And on the public side, is this worth it? Is this something that we want in our community? Is this going to be a helpful funding source if we decide to have a pretty rigorous TIF development program to do and really engage in these types of economic development activities? So as I mentioned at the outset, I think these are great. They're great projects to do. They're all above the line. It's new improvements. It really can make a difference in whether or not something happens. And on the public side, it can really make a difference on, planning to use TIF funds and deciding which ones go to the general fund to support the municipality and which ones stay in the town's TIF funds, help support their economic development activities. It's kind of a forced planning, if you will, which from my perspective is good because it helps focus communities, it helps focus the private sector as well on here's the best use of dollars in this particular instance, at least based on the information we know, and you kind of follow through in that path. So, I hate to use the win-win scenario, but that's really what, from my perspective, I try to achieve, frankly, whether I'm representing a private client or a public client, because that's really what you're looking to do. It really needs to be kind of a symbiotic relationship, because if only one is benefiting, not the other, it's not going to work. It's not going to fit, in my opinion, with the overall intent and framework of the TIF statute. But when you do, I think that's exactly what the TIF statute was meant to do, is help encourage, this level of broadening the tax base, helping to protect existing businesses so they can grow. That all translates to so many direct and indirect economic benefits. It's really locally a good flexible tool to have to help encourage those types of activities. So from my perspective, I like to be a little bit bullish, for the forest product sector. I think Maine has a bright future, just to pick that out as one industry. We've got a great history. We've got a great resource. We've got, an incredible workforce that can do it. It's just a matter of matching everything together to get some more projects going into the future.
Thank you, John. I have a question. How many towns that you work with have what Peggy described early in the session as standing procedures for the town, of sort of the checklist of everything they require and what the town typically does for a formula with TIF? What do you see in the future?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It varies. I mean, some don't have any, formal or informal TIF policy. When I talk to folks and they don't have one, or even if they do, I suggest you might want to think about doing it, or at least look at some, because it helps give you an idea of what you might want to do or how you might want to structure. I think I would say the more service center orientated communities tend to have policies in place. More rural communities don't, but they may end up having one just by going through the process. So I'd say it varies. I think it's helpful generally to have that in place because it helps provide, overall framework or guidelines, if you will. Not that those can't change by any means, but it helps set some parameters up and can help facilitate dialogue.
Great, thanks, John. We have two questions from the audience. The first is, how does a TIF and BETA work together? If new assets qualify for the BETE tax exemption, is a TIF still a better option? And if this question, oh, sorry, is that something you could answer, John?
Yeah, I'll take a cut at it. I would say, if you have equipment that qualifies for the BETE, it's going to go under BETE. I mean, that's what most people do because it's tax exempt. And, generally speaking for the communities, I think 50% reimbursement is what they get. It depends on the value. That can change sometimes. So as Peggy mentioned a little bit earlier, for personal property equipment that qualifies under BETE, that typically is not in a TIF district. Other types of equipment or personal property that isn't exempt certainly could be. A lot of times folks focus on real property in terms of a TIF district, but I've seen both. There's certain equipment that doesn't qualify for BETE, certain power production, power generation, which can have very high assessed values. But generally speaking, at least from what I've seen, people, if they're BETE, they're doing BETE. If it's not qualified, that's more the ground to do a TIF potentially on, whether it's real or personal property.
Great, thanks. And the last question is around for towns that are recovering from an economic deficit. You know, they're typically trying to, you know, repair their town budgets. How do you counsel on a town that needs the increased tax revenue versus a town that's trying to, you know, at the same time trying to attract investment? I mean, you talked about industries competing all over the world, and a TIF might make or break them relocating in town, but the town really needs the tax revenues to patch their budget.
Yeah, I can tell you that from East Millinocket standpoint, we're sitting on a 32.25 mill rate, which is pretty high. We need to get it down to 22, 23. So we play that game to some extent with, if we didn't do it, would this development walk away, and what kind of jobs is it bringing to the town? What kind of services is it bringing to the town? And we did one for a grocery store development, which, you know, you think, why would you do that? But this is a little town that has very little commercial district. And this was a group of folks that were going to put in significant dollars into the town. We wanted to encourage that. The employment has been amazing, and the service that they provide to the community has been great. So that kind of justifies itself and kind of lends itself to the pattern of what can we do. Again, we didn't give them 100% TIF. We took 20%, I think, the first couple of years, and it's going to decrease every year so that the town ends up getting back their investment. So you have to weigh out what are the overall benefits versus not getting that tax dollar to reduce those tax mill rates. It's not an easy game to play, but it's one that you have to kind of figure it out and sort through it, and you have to have a good justification, because you're going to go before the taxpayers and talk about this, and you have to shape up why you're doing what you're doing. Why else would you give anybody such a big tax break?
Great, thank you, Peggy. Next, we're going to move along in the agenda. Deborah Johnson, if you are ready, I will allow you to introduce yourself because of the many roles that you have at EECD.
Hi to everybody.
CDBG and the MRDA. So take it away, Deb.
All right, I'll shut my video off because I can't hold my phone up, but I apologize for that, but just want to say hi to everybody. And yes, first things first, yes, my real job, other than chairing the Maine Rural Development Authority Board, as Robert said, is the director of the Office of Community Development at the ECD. And that is the major portion of that is managing the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, as we like to say, all of the acronyms. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the community side. So in order to have attract investment and have companies want to locate there and stay there and grow there, you've got to have a strong, vibrant, healthy community. And that's one of the things that block grant funds can provide all kinds of resources for. Overall, you have to keep in mind that we've got to benefit low to moderate income persons in some fashions. And so we have a bunch of eligible activities that can support a community. You can do housing activities, like we do some multifamily redevelopment, renovations. If you have a good developer that wants to do that for affordable housing, infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, East Millinocket, Ashland, all kinds of rural towns have gotten infrastructure grants for us, because some of the needs of a new development or a growing development might be that you need sewer water upgrades or something. I won't get into the weeds of the requirements, but just to know that those activities are out there. We also have downtown revitalization grants, and under certain circumstances, and the town can do sidewalk improvements, some lighting improvements, sometimes just visually upgrading your town makes everybody feel better. And then a smaller version of that is called our Community Enterprise Grant Program. And that's a smaller version of it, of the big downtown revitalization. And it's to do smaller little pockets. You could do a little pocket part, facade improvements of your businesses. So I call it like the magic geranium. You start fixing up one area of town, and next thing you know, others go, and especially with private sector. It happens all the time. If you have any eligible homeowner, income eligible homeowner in any rural municipality in Maine can go to their CAP agency and apply for home repair monies. Again, that's theoretical. Obviously, we never have enough resources for everybody, but it is there. So the CAP agencies have CDBG funding that they can use for single family home repair. We also do public service activities. You have nonprofits in your community that are helping people either with food pantries or elder care or any kind of literacy programs. So that's the other piece, is you want to take care of the less fortunate people in your community, because everybody is helped by everybody else being okay. So nonprofits can come to us for public service grants. I think economic development. We also do economic development projects to create jobs. So the CDBG program can do a lot of things, but one of the things that I do talk about, I'll be mindful because I know that we're probably going long, is that you don't go looking for the source of funding and then develop a project. What you do is you plan at your local level, is you create what the vision for your community that you think, and then you say, all right, what do we need to do first? I will say that I was blown away by the Catan, the Gazetteer, the roadmap, the orange big book that was done up in that region. And then you say, all right, let's go check off one box after another. And what is the funding source for that? So it's not go look for the funding source and then create a project. It's develop a plan, identify projects, and then work on it. So I'll leave that there. And then I will speak briefly. I think Jen is talking about FAME products, but the Maine Rural Development Authority has a couple of programs. And again, our website at Maine Office of Community Development is ocd.org, meocd.org. And also the Maine Rural Development Authority has a couple of programs where the municipality or a local development authority or a business can go to. One is called the Community Industrial Buildings Program, and the other one is called the Commercial Facilities Development Program. And that's specifically for underutilized industrial sites that need to be refurbished and brought back onto the tax rolls. So without getting to the weeds on that, you can go to the Maine Rural Development Authority website and check out those programs. And then quickly, because I'm not sure how many saw the announcement yesterday, but I want to just put a plug in for the state of Maine and the Working Communities Challenge. And I would urge you to go look at the Maine Working Communities Challenge. Just Google that and you'll go to a website. It's in progress. There's a steering committee. DECD is a partner of that. And it ultimately will be communities of 6,000 population, or a collaboration of communities up to get to that population threshold. And you can apply for funding from the Federal Reserve Bank and all these other organizations have put money in for communities to work to better themselves. So that is ongoing and in progress. So I would stay tuned to that just because it's another potential. And I'll leave it there because I know we're running short of time.
Well, thanks, Deb. That is a ton of information. You're doing just fine on time, actually. So I will follow up with Debbie after this presentation to get all of the websites and information that she provided very quickly verbally, so everyone who's participating today can see that. Deb, thank you very much. That is extremely informative. From that quick presentation, I learned about stuff that I didn't know existed there as well.
I'll email you that stuff.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I will email you that,
the
descriptions of the programs.
Great, and I'll get it to all the participants today. Thank you. And For Maine and NDF is also looking very closely at the Federal Reserve Communities Program that Deb just outlined. So we'll be in touch with the For Maine communities about that at the appropriate time. Wonderful. Well, moving forward, I'm going to introduce Jennifer Cummings, who works at the Finance Authority of Maine, for the programs that she oversees that may be applicable to municipalities. So Jennifer, if you'd like to enhance your introduction and take it away.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. Jen Cummings, Director of Business at FAME. I run the business side of the house, so commercial loans. We also offer some municipal bonds, which I'll talk about. and tax credits for investments. So we have a great team of lenders to help with all your needs. But I'm going to kind of springboard off what Debbie was talking about, the Maine Rural Development Authority first, and just provide some examples of businesses that benefited from that loan program. So as Deb said, those are underutilized industrial sites. We've had the MRDA most recently gave a loan to Saddleback up in Rangeley for the rehab of the lodge. Go Lab in Madison, which is a wood processing production facility. Maine Hudson Trails, Grandy Oats, which is an oat producer, rehabbed a school in Hiram. NC Hunt in Jefferson. MIRA, the Maine Midcoast Regional Redevelopment Authority, utilized some of those funds. So a breadth of options for that program. Those are loans, not grants, up to $1 million. And there is a link on our website, and I'll cite that later on. But I thought I'd start going over, and FAME's involved in the Maine Rural Development Program, in which we service that loan portfolio for the state. So we also service some agricultural programs as well. But the most relevant to this conversation would be the Maine Rural Development Authority. So FAME also offers tax-exempt municipal bonds. And this would allow a company that's coming in to gain some interest rate reduction on bond financing packages. So essentially FAME is a conduit to issue tax exempt bonds and relend the money to the intended borrower. The credit would have to be bankable, so it'd have to be something that a traditional lender would be involved with that process. And since the lender doesn't have to pay tax interest on pay tax on the interest income, they can offer a lower interest rate to that borrower. These are available to 501c3 borrowers in any capacity. So any 501c3 business is eligible for this. However, other borrowers are limited to small manufacturing, solid waste, and recycling businesses. So the funds can be used for any purpose for a 501c3, and they are utilized for capital projects only for other borrowers. And they must be approved by tax counsel as eligible prior to approval and as part of that closing process. So these really only make sense with a little bit of a larger transaction because of the additional costs with tax counsel. Generally, $2 million is the minimum for it to make sense cost-wise. And there is no maximum for the 501c3 borrower, but there is a $10 million maximum for other businesses. So there is tax counsel required because there's use restrictions, and we want to ensure that that's abided by. So if you have a borrower that would be interested in this, it would be coordination with a traditional lender and FAME. And FAME or the municipality can be the issuer of the bond, but the process needs to begin with that FAME application. And we would appreciate to be contacted early in the process, as there are tax rules and limits that limit refinancing or reimbursement of expenditures unless there's an inducement agreement or resolution up front. The process requires notification in the newspaper, as well as notice to in-state competitors and public hearings at FAME. So as well as letters of support from DEP and the municipality. So we do like to be involved early in the process to make sure all the ducks are in a row. And once approved, it's essentially like closing a complex commercial transaction. So that's a really quick overview of that program. We also offer traditional bank type loans that are direct to borrowers. So if you have a business owner that's having trouble and needs some assistance, we do have a direct loan program. These are traditionally more risky loans that this business may be needing some assistance. Maybe they're going through a difficult time, and it's typically a loan that a bank can't do or won't do. We also recently started offering some COVID specific loans. So if you have a company that's shut down because of COVID or is minimizing their hours because of COVID, we do have a couple loan programs available directly as well to help businesses get through that time. We have, and they can be in conjunction with the SBA PPP money, the EIDL loans. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We can do those in addition to other forms of assistance. Also, FAME's kind of bread and butter is our commercial loan insurance product. This is something that assists traditional banks, credit unions, or alternative lenders to mitigate their risk and get a business some financing. So what that is essentially an insurance policy that the bank takes out in contract form with FAME. And if the loan goes bad, we essentially fund an insurance payment to them. So there is a cost for that, but it allows banks to do more lending, support that economic growth, and hopefully, get some jobs created as well. And that process, we have a couple of different avenues for that, but traditionally it's very, we work in partnership with, I'd say, most of the banks in the state, most of the credit unions, and we can even work with alternative lenders as well. So that program is up to $7.5 million of FAME loan insurance. So 75% of a $10 million loan. So we're trying to find that sweet spot, between a really large deal and a really small deal to be able to help businesses continue to grow. And we're also supporting startup and entrepreneurship. So if you have a company that is wanting to start out, we can help and guide them and provide them with resources to help, create their business plan and kind of get a really good sense of where they need to be. Like Deb said, a plan before you're looking for money is always a great thing to do. The last thing I'll talk about is the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program. And this is a program that is designed to encourage equity investment in Maine businesses. So it can be through individual investors or private venture firms. And FAME is authorized to provide state of Maine income tax credits to investors for up to 40% of the cash equity provided to eligible Maine businesses. And those investments can be used for fixed assets or working capital, R&D. So there are some eligibility requirements around this program. And this program, you may have heard recently, we've traditionally been capped at $5 million of credits annually. And we were running into issues in that on January 1st, we had a line out our door, or January 2nd, I guess, it was a holiday, but a line out the door of people wanting to submit their application for those $5 million of credits. In May, the legislature approved an increase to this program of now our credits are $15 million a year. So this has been a really highly used program. And we were really fortunate that the state increased that allocation annually. So the eligibility requirements around this program are that businesses are located in Maine and the investor must own less than 50% of the business and not be directly in control of the business. And the company can't have annual gross sales of over $5 million. These credits are specific to businesses that are involved in manufacturing, development or applied advanced technologies, value-added natural resources, or a visual media production company. So this program was designed to specifically attract investment in those industry types. And so we get the $15 million allocation. and a 40% tax credit is provided on that investment. An individual investor can provide up to $500,000 per business. And there are some aggregate limits on what a business can get in investment per lifetime and per year. So it's $2 million a year and $3.5 million in a lifetime. The investments do have to be at risk for 5 years, and you're allowed to take 25% of that credit annually, starting in the first year of investment. So previously that tax credit was 50% and now it's only 40%. That was in an attempt to spread those credits amongst more Maine businesses. And that again was approved in May, that adjustment to the program. So there are special rules for private venture firms that are a little bit different than that individual investor. But these private venture firms can be out of state, and they actually receive refundable tax credits because they obviously may not have tax obligations in the state of Maine. And there are some reporting requirements as well on there. And we also, with the increased allocation, increase the fee schedules on those. So although it doesn't, there is a lot of work involved, the fees are relatively minute for this program, and we do require that they're sent in upfront. Those are the programs that we have that I thought would be relevant to this conversation. Fame Maine is our website, and there's a ton of information on there specific to each of the programs I mentioned, as well as applications. So if you have any business owners that are coming to you needing assistance, you can certainly have them contact me directly or send them to our website where there's a lot of good resources.
Terrific. Jennifer, thank you so much. We're coming up against time, but I do want to ask one general question, both to you, Jennifer, and Deb. Number of our communities have set up a 501c3 or other nonprofit economic development organization in town to try to garner more interest in development. Can they partner with local businesses or developments to serve as that 501c3 conduit, or would having the private sector be involved still disqualify a deal? Specifically, I'm thinking about the BAT program and some other programs that are limited to 501c3s receiving funds.
In an effort to not answer that incorrectly, I would say that would be a question for our attorney who handles that program more than I do. So I would ask him. I think just there would definitely be some limitations around setting it up just as a holding, kind of a holding cell to get those benefits.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. I want to be respectful of everyone's time today on the panel. We have recorded this. I will send a link to the recording after I'm able to dress it up a little bit, and I will send a follow-up email to all the participants today for the materials that we have been provided. Thank you very much for your participation. And next Thursday at the same time, 8 a.m., we will be having a session on capital stacking for industrial projects. Thank you again for participating today, and have a wonderful day, everyone.